Well, hello there and welcome. It's Monday, 23rd of August, and I started the morning with a stinking headache, and some colouring was just the antidote along with some headache pills. You saw at the beginning of the video just now the stack of distress inks that I'm using to colour this. I had added colour down at the bottom to the left there, and I'd used a Tombow marker. But that colour reminded me of forest moss, so that was one of the distress colours I used. I also used, what's it called? Fossilised amber, weathered wood, broken china, seedless preserves, and dusty concord, I think it was, because they are represented, some of them are represented in the background colours of this page, which were distress inks. And of course, the distress inks will go over the top of that, and because there's relatively little ink behind, what little is there will mix with the colour, but it won't be that noticeable because there's such a small amount. And you can see here I'm using them a bit like watercolour paint or an ink, and I'm using a water brush to pick them up and move them. In hindsight, I really could have done with using an ordinary paintbrush and a jar of water and some tissue to get a much less wet brush to move the colours at times to get a more intense colour. But it is what it is, and once I've come around a bit, or at another time, I'll go back to this and I'll add contrast, either with more distress ink, or more likely I'll use a different medium. So I may dig out some coloured pencils, or I might use ballpoint pens or fine liners to add some texture to them. But there's sort of like, part of me is regretting using the pink and the purple, because in comparison to the other colours, they're a bit in your face. And this is one of the big problems I do have with colouring, is that I can choose what it seems to be a good idea at the time, and then when it comes to putting them into practical use, I'm thinking, why did I do that? I could have chosen other blues and greens, for example, to go here, or perhaps some neutrals, browns, which would look, more in with that distress feel and wouldn't be out of place with the background, to be honest. But I didn't. And I did end up mixing colours as well, as you'll see. And here with this one, I started off with forest moss with these particular motifs. And then I used the fossilised amber to go over the top to make it a bit more yellow, because it was quite a mucky, dark brown green. It wasn't the green I thought it was, or that it can be. So that was an interesting, thing to do, but it worked. And it did mimic the colours fairly well in those leaves at the bottom. It's not identical, but it's close enough for me. These are the bits that I didn't mind the highlights of pink and purple mostly, but these really do stand out as being odd. And you'll see I go back and I add colour and I darken them, and eventually I work out that's not right. And I then use water to wet the surface to pick some of the colour up, and that makes it a bit better, but it's still a bit too stark for my not stark, too intense, and the colours are too clean, too bright to go with the others, really, in some ways. This green here was made by yellow and tumbled glass, the fossilised amber and the tumbled glass, and perhaps a bit of weathered wood or a bit of forest moss at times, just to make something a bit different there. This little piece, this is where I really was glad I had the purple, because it went into there. It's another one of these things that looks a bit like stained glass, one of these motifs I like to use. So arches and things of stained glass, sometimes mechanical looking, sometimes not. These actually end up okay, and especially when you see at the end, because I do go, you get to see the full range of embellishment here, although once everything's dried, I may use a clear glaze pen on some bits. Maybe not, or add in some metallics would be quite nice. Or glitter pens possibly, which would need a clear glaze over to stop the glitter from being rubbed off and help to bring out the shine, but I don't know yet for sure. I'm tempted, particularly with those fronds at the bottom and these here where I've got like those bubbles or seeds or sacks filled with some kind of fluid. They'd be quite nice shiny, so they look dimensional and they look different, but I don't know. I want to let things dry first and come back to them with a clear head and fresh eyes. It was really nice to use distress inks like this. I haven't done this for a while, and of course I do like the colours of distress inks, particularly I seem to be drawn very much to the browns far more than any other colour. But I do have to say there's some lovely new ones that have come out in the past year or so. There's a robin's egg blue and there's some kind of patina. Can't remember what it's called, but it's a lovely soft green, like verdigris, that you get on copper roofs, and that would be quite nice. And bronze statues and so on, things that have been weathered, they have a lot of copper in them, and you get this lovely green, dusty green verdigris corrosion on them. So those are something I do need to look into. If you watched yesterday's video, I mentioned about there being distress markers. They're no longer done, so that's fine. I'm happy to work like this and use other fine liners I've got if I need to add any texture and lines to it, because I'll see, ballpoint pens are my favourite, as you know. With this one I didn't have any ballpoint pen shading before I started, and I'm not entirely sure whether I will afterwards. I may very well, and just use black or a blue perhaps. That's probably black, because grey is just a nice neutral. These shapes here were quite interesting to do because I used weathered wood, I think it was, on the edge, and and broken china in the middle as a lighter colour, and I used quite an intense amount of ink there in comparison to other areas, but of course it dries back. And then I did use some of the purple to darken the edges and give some shadow. And that's something I need to go back in and sort out a bit more, which is why I need to let it dry and then decide how I do that, whether I use in Entangled style something like a graphite pencil or perhaps chalk pastel, because that would work nicely with a tortillon to blend it out, or whether I use coloured pencils or Inktense or some such thing, but I do know that I want to bring out a sense of dimension a bit more. I have some of that in those horn-shaped elements at the top, where I've used ink lines, texture lines, to show where the shadow is and to help to bring out that feeling of volume, but it does need a little bit more. You'll see with the embellishments I do add some more. Again, just a note while all of this is happening, because it's just adding colour, is that I did complete adding colour to the drawing I added colour to yesterday's art, and I've added ballpoint pen in shadow, so I'll show that on my Saturday sketchbook flip through most probably, so you can see what's happened, because there'll be a lot of sketchbook work this week. I'm having a break from projects. There is one I do want to start, but it's still circling around my head, and I will get it done. I need to look up the dimensions that it needs to be, because it is a kind of commission, so and I've got some ideas for things that I'd like to use for it, but we'll see what happens. These were fun. I really enjoyed doing these because I used the forest moss at the bottom of these seed shapes. I'll call them seeds because I don't know what they are. And fossilised amber at the top. and that yellow with the moss green actually works out well. And here I go back and add more of the seedless preserves to give a darker colour there, because it was looking a bit insipid. These are in, I used a mixture there, I think, of weathered wood and purple, and here I'm just using weathered wood to go over the little sections in those shell shapes. And here I'm just adding more colour to the insides of these seeds. Going back and forth. Because again, it's nice to be able to go back and forth and add colour. And I'm not, it's not such a big deal if some of the colour underneath shifts. I just have to be cognizant of that. I don't end up with everything all one colour, which can happen. The centre of these bits, they were left just one colour, and those are definitely going to be, there's going to be some iridescence or some sparkle put there with clear glaze on, because that's what I feel they need in the middle. Just a little hint, perhaps. And here there's just some shadow adding, and here I'm going in with those little seeds that fill in spaces. And I wanted those sort of like a golden colour. This could have been a rainbow of colours, but it's not. I used tumbled glass and weathered wood to fill in the bands alternately. In hindsight, I could have done with some greys actually. Deep greys would be good here to get some real intensity of colours. But said I'm not too worried, because I can always go back afterwards and add colour. And I may very well do that before too much longer. Once I've finished with this, who knows? I don't, that's for sure. Now I'm adding tops of these. I used the purple, and I'm thinking, oh, why didn't I use the yellow? But I needed to use the yellow or the purple and the pink elsewhere, to try to tie different parts together, so it's not just in one place. The colour is to use it elsewhere. But yeah, it's sort of like, in hindsight is a wonderful thing, and I never learn, do I? I went for complementary colours instead of analogous. Yeah, complementary colours are opposite each other on the colour wheel, and analogous are close together. They're 5 colours that are really close together on the same side of the colour wheel, next door to each other, neighbours. And neighbours usually work well together. Not always. You do get troublesome neighbours, but in terms of the colour wheel, neighbours usually work well together. I'm just finishing off the last bits and bobs of filling those in. And here, and again, this is an area where I'm thinking, oh, why did I do that colour? It seemed a good idea at the time, but afterwards, and then once I've done it, I can't undo it in a neat way. So, not on this paper, but it's okay, it works. Adding some shadow there, and here just darkening areas up just a little bit. Again, they'll need more shadow, but it's not something I'm going to attempt there. So here, this is where I'm using a white Sakura Souffle pen. And these pens, when they're wet, you can see they're white, but they're a bit translucent. But as they dry, they become white, and they dry slightly raised on paper. And they're my favourite pen to use to add white dots, white embellishments. And I'm doing that to bring highlights in. And I'm doing a lot. But I like what happens. But not everywhere. Here was fun to do, because I thought the white would complement the black dots that's in there. And at the top of these, I wanted some white dots. I nearly went and got a different colour souffle pen, a green or a yellow, to add dots to those seeded things, but I didn't. I have added highlights there in the seeds that are there, and here I'm doing it on these. And this was a point where I thought, oh, I should have really got the yellow green, or the yellow, bright yellow souffle out, so that would, wouldn't have been quite so stark against that, but I just went with it. And I think that's where I finished. Yeah, done. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you for joining me, and thank you for sticking through to the end of this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Leave a comment below if you have. A thumbs up would be nice, and a subscribe to the channel would be even nicer. I hope to see you here again. Until then, please do take care. Look after yourselves, and please find time to be creative. Bye-bye.